When you look at a tree, what do you see? Something still, right? Silent, unmoving. But that's just on the outside. Because inside, it's a completely different story. Every single tree is actually a ferocious, nonstop engine. Yeah, one of the most powerful and efficient pumps on the entire planet, and it's silently defying gravity every single second.
So that brings us to the big mystery we're going to unravel today. Think about it. How does a giant redwood, we're talking a tree taller than a skyscraper, get a drink of water? How does it get that water from way down in the roots all the way up to its highest leaves? There's no motor, no pistons, no electricity. So, how on earth does it work? Okay, so what's your first guess? Most of us, our first instinct is to think, well, the water must be pushed up from the roots, right? Kind of like a sump pump in a basement. But here's the crazy part. The reality is the complete opposite. It turns out water isn't being pushed up at all. It's being pulled all the way from the top. So if the engine isn't down in the roots, then where is it? Well, it's hundreds of feet up in the air, spread out across thousands and thousands of leaves. Each one is acting like its own tiny solar-powered motor. The real action, it all starts at the top. The scientific name for this engine is transpiration. And what it really is just water evaporating from the leaves through these microscopic little pores. But this is not some gentle evaporation. As each water molecule turns into vapor and escapes, it creates this tiny little vacuum, a super powerful suction that actually drives the entire system. And the process itself is just elegantly simple. The sun provides the energy, heating up the leaf. That heat makes the water evaporate. The evaporation creates suction, and that suction pulls the next water molecule up to take its place. It's a totally passive, brilliant, and completely solar-powered pump. All right, so a tiny bit of suction in one leaf, that's one thing. But how does that force travel hundreds of feet down to the roots without the column of water just snapping apart? This is where the incredible physics of water itself comes into play. The secret weapon here is a property called cohesion. You can think of water molecules as being like tiny little magnets. Because of their structure, they are incredibly sticky, and they cling to each other really, really tightly, almost like they're holding hands. And it's this property that lets them form a continuous, unbreakable chain all the way from a leaf down to a root. So just picture this, a massive conga line of water molecules. When the leader at the very top evaporates and leaves the party, it tugs the entire line up one step. And that pull is transmitted almost instantly down the entire length of the tree. Now, this constant pulling puts the water inside the tree under some serious tension. Physicists call it negative pressure. So instead of being compressed, like the air in a tire, the water column is actually being stretched, almost like a giant rubber band running right through the trunk of the tree. Just how extreme are we talking? Well, in some trees, this pressure can hit negative 20 atmospheres. That is 20 times the atmospheric pressure we feel every day. But in reverse, it's a pulling force of just incredible magnitude. And look, this isn't just some abstract number for a physics textbook. We're talking about a tension so immense, so powerful, that if you tried to create it inside a man-made steel pipe, that pipe would literally buckle and shatter into pieces. And yet, a tree just handles this. Every single day, no problem. Which, of course, brings up a pretty big question. How can a living thing withstand forces that would absolutely destroy steel? Well, the answer is in the tree's internal plumbing, a system that is a true masterpiece of natural engineering. This pipeline is called the xylem, and it's not just one big pipe. Oh no, it's a network of millions of tiny hollow tubes. Their walls are reinforced with this super strong stuff called lignin. They're also incredibly narrow, which helps prevent disastrous air bubbles from forming under all that tension. And maybe best of all, it's a redundant system. So if one little pipe fails, others can just take over. It is perfectly designed for the job. So let's try to put this incredible system into perspective. A giant redwood can lift water over 110 meters. That's more than 360 feet, straight up into the air. Now, let's see how our own technology stacks up against that. Yeah, the contrast here is pretty stark. A tree's pump is totally passive, powered only by the sun. Our best pumps need enormous amounts of energy. A tree's pipelines are self-repairing. Ours break down and need constant maintenance. In terms of sheer efficiency and design, there's just no comparison. Nature wins. Okay, but this hydraulic marvel isn't just about keeping one tree alive. When you scale this whole process up to an entire forest, the microscopic pulling of water has a massive, planet-altering impact. Get this. Of all the water a tree pulls up from the ground, only about 3% of it is actually used for its own growth and survival. A staggering 97% is just passed straight through and released directly into the atmosphere as water vapor. So what that means is every forest is basically a giant biological machine, just pumping colossal amounts of moisture from the ground right up into the sky. And all that water vapor is what forms clouds, drives rainfall, and actively shapes our planet's weather and climate. What a mind-blowing example of this in action. Let's talk about the Amazon rainforest. It is so good at this, so efficient, that it actually generates up to half of its own rainfall. The trees release so much moisture into the air that it forms clouds, and those clouds rain right back down on the forest. It's this spectacular self-sustaining cycle. So the takeaway here is simple, but it's really profound. You're not just looking at a static object, you're looking at a living fountain. Every single leaf is a tiny, perfect pump, and every tree is a silent hydraulic marvel, working in perfect harmony with the laws of physics. And that brings us to one last, really critical thought. We've just seen how powerful this system is, right? How it moves water, defies gravity, and literally creates our weather. So it kind of forces you to ask a pretty big question. If every single leaf is a pump, what happens to our planet when we decide to turn off millions or even billions of them all at once?